Apparently, the word in Armenian for peacock is similar to the word for this phoenix in Persian mythology. And inexplicably, you'll notice anytime you see this kind of like Eastern European or Western creature of fantasy, they just add in the details to put in those feathers characteristic of peacocks all the time. And I think, well, that's such an interesting detail. Why would they put that in there when, if the creature doesn't exist or doesn't look like anything we have, why would they think to, make it resemble a peacock? And I guess you can come up with all kinds of excuses, but something that's agreed upon in history, in the mainstream history, as all these fanciful creatures existing, and there's so much cultural devotion to it. They don't have most of the things that we have in society today, but they have these like imprints on the collective memory. Apparently cultures that never talk to each other at all have the same memory. And I just find it interesting how there's all kinds of hints and clues as to what we're dealing with. And like, for example, the word for palm trees is actually phoenix in Greek, or I think it's like the name of the family of palm trees. Dactylifera is called phoenix. It just it's kind of strange, when you think about it. You have birds mentioned all the time in the Quran. Nobody can really point to what kind of birds they are. I guess they just think they're just regular, I don't know, like just little sparrows and stuff. But in actuality, these birds are, explicitly the effect of a divine miracle, which is Isa al-Masih, supported by the Ruh from Allah, creating these birds, perhaps after some cataclysm or something. Like, they're actually made in a similar way to humans from plane. And I can't picture that being anything like, obviously the word for birds in Arabic is related to something that flies, and there's all kinds of examples of things that we wouldn't call birds today, but they do fly, like insects and bats, and a lot of birds, they don't fly too. So that's it's kind of like interesting to think about if we had more biological diversity in the past. For example, in the fossil record, officially everything is way, way bigger. Like, they had these like dragonflies that were like meters long, and everything was much bigger. Like, even the small creatures are as big as like pets we have today. When I look at these kinds of stories, whether it's a dog or a raven or a cow or anything, I kind of have to wonder, what's the value of that there? Unless the Quran is simply, like most people see it, as a moral lesson. And so these are just kind of like Grimm's, fairy tales, where you can have a donkey and you can have a dog and they talk and nobody takes it seriously. It's just there to impart some kind of moral, lesson, like Aesop's fables or something. But, that's not the purpose of the Quran. Like, that would be, there's all kinds of human literature that you can write today if you want to, and impart the same level or even more, in a more cohesive way than what appears to be in the Quran. So the Quran has to be eons ahead of that, and describing things that have eternal relevance, for not just mankind, but just for jinn as well, for everything. And yeah, I mean, they say like the Prophet was given no knowledge of the unseen, but then Allah is constantly telling him, like, this is news of the unseen that we give you. And it's just not even the whole thing. It's just what's sufficient enough for him to, I guess, awaken what humanity forgotten at the time. It's if you're to take the Prophet Muhammad today, and he came exactly as he was before and told people exactly the same things, they would take the pitchforks and torches against him so quickly. He wouldn't have time to even explain or utter a word, because what he represents is the actual truth. And nobody wants to hear that. Nobody wants to hear the actual truth of what happened, what's going on in our, like, nothing. You could tell somebody today, like, hey, did you know that they, steal kids and they sodomize them and they extract their blood and stuff? And they would think you're crazy. They think there's no way that could possibly happen. Nobody, you know how many people it would take to cover that up? And this is how they think, like, even for the moon landing, like, they say, oh, there's way too many people to cover that up. We definitely went to the moon and stuff. But really, I think they really underestimate how obedient slaves and sheep humans can be. When the creator of the universe compares them to cattle, even worse than cattle. What does that imply? Like, what do you use cattle for? You use them as a resource. You use them to subjugate them and make them just lower than you. This is exactly what you see every day. Like how many crimes, like major crimes, like major theft and major, criminal activity happens every day, and nobody actually does anything about it. They pay their taxes, and it's illegal. It's actually a theft. I'm not saying don't pay your taxes, by the way. I'm just saying that provably you can find information on all of the hoaxes and all of the just psychological operations. I mean, everything that they do. I mean, you have to wonder, how could people possibly think only humans are at the very top? This is a different level, different caliber of, like, mastermind going on here. And you hear like, oh, well, it's the Jews, right? I mean, I could never picture myself, like, how could they coordinate all of that? Like, these people can barely, like, keep and practice their, religion, because of how complex it is and how it doesn't even seem like it was, brought about by a human at all. How can people, like, think it's like these, like, measly humans that can do all, like, there's no way. There's no way. They don't know anything. It's the same with, like, the Islamic tradition, like the scholars that people take very seriously. They actually are very disinformed, really, about the Quran, about anything to do with Islam. They never thought about anything close to what is actually in the Quran. Everything you can imagine outside of the Quran, because again, we don't have access to the former books on the unseen the Quran actually completes and references. We don't have access to that. There's no Bible in the Quran. There's no Gospel. There's no Torah. There's no Psalms. Even the word for Psalms is a complete hoax. I mean, nobody in Hebrew or even Arabic would call Psalms Zabur. Nobody. But anyway, it's just interesting to me, like, the hadith seems to stop at the Bukhari. Hadith seems to stop at Abu Huraira, when what we're dealing with is a terminal illness of just storytellers in every facet of life, everything they've told you about since you were a kid. What you live on, where you come from, who you are, What's the purpose of this life? What's the meaning of it? What can you expect from the world? Who's in charge of the world? Anything. Your entire culture, your whole identity. I mean, as hard as it is to accept, that's what really hadith embodies. Like, the people that take what Allah sent down, okay, in the Quran, and they just change it up a little bit. They make games and make diversions and distractions and falsehoods, and they embellish or elaborate all kinds of lies around it, which is why, like, you don't really see, Allah even give credence to what they came up with. He just says it's like lahwal hadith. So they took his hadith Allah, and they made all kinds of different media from that, all kinds of different games and mental gymnastics. That's basically why the hadith cannot be followed in front of the Quran. Like, if you think about it, the Sunni corpus, or even the Shia one for that matter, is dependent upon the Quran. If the Quran never existed, there would be no hadith. It's a dependent variable. That's a fact. And obviously, it all contradicts, and it makes no sense, and apparently the same people preserve that and the Quran, which is kufr, because no human preserved the Quran. But this is what we have today, and the sooner people start to question that, you're going to see the world change, because our consciousness has been lowered on a level we've never actually had before. So all we have left really is the Quran from that era, from that time.